Alright, so this is video 2. In this video, I'm going to be making a Youth Combat East Kingdom double-layered 1-inch PEX weapon. I know it's a mouthful. A lot of the stuff I went over in the other video, the pre-information, I'm going to do it again here because I don't know if people are going to watch the other video or not. So, I'm making East Kingdom legal weapons. East Kingdom goes a bit above and beyond society minimum when it comes to building youth combat weapons, and I live in the East, so we're going with that. There are different things you can make your weapons out of with the cores. You can use Siliflex, PEX, or rattan. You cannot use PVC. My weapons that I'm making are out of PEX because I don't have any rattan handy. But the two sizes of PEX that I have is 3/4 inch, which is right here, and 1 inch. Today we're going to be using the 1 inch to make a weapon. My other video, I made a 3/4 inch weapon that had a Q-tip thrusting tip, which meant that the blade was all just one layer of foam, and then on the thrusting tip and on the butt of the weapon, I had 2 layers to meet the 2.5 inch requirement. But some people don't like the Q-tip look. They want the sword to be all the same size. So I'm going to make a double-layered weapon. What I usually use for foam is 1/2-inch wall foam from Home Depot, which is about this big, and 3/8 inch self-sealing gray foam from Lowe's. When I do a double-bladed weapon, I actually usually use double layer of 3/8 inch foam because it makes the weapon less bulky. But I don't have that today, so I'm just going to make a bulkier weapon. I would suggest if you're going to double layer your whole weapon and you have access to both Lowe's and Home Depot, go to Lowe's, buy the 3/8 inch wall foam. It just makes the weapon not quite as huge the whole way. So we're going to start with our piece of PEX. I've already cut it down to size. It's a Division 3 weapon for me, so it's a bit bigger. I basically just measure it to myself and then make it a little taller because most people are taller than me. My 3/8 inch PEX, they have these nice little caps that go on top, but they don't make caps or plugs in appropriate material for 1 inch PEX. So what I use, you're allowed to use leather and stuff like that. I just use strapping tape, which is also fiber tape. You can get it in the mailing section of Staples. Apparently it's somewhere at Home Depot and Lowe's. I have no idea where that is. I just use the one from Staples. So, to deal with the ends of your 1 inch PEX weapon, you take the strapping tape and you just wrap it over the end. I bring it down onto the weapon a little bit. You wrap it across the top, and then you use your handy dandy scissors to cut it. And you do it again, as soon as you can find your edge again. Cross the other way. Then you push all that down, and you're good to go. You have a nice capped piece that will probably not go punching through the foam. Then you do it to the other side. You flatten all that down and you are good to go. Alright, now on to the foam. 1-inch interior diameter foam. This happens to be the 1/2-inch wall foam from Home Depot. Like I said, I suggest you use the 3/8-inch foam when you're double layering, just so the weapon isn't too bulky. You just slide it right over the end of the weapon. And slide it down. Sometimes it takes a little bit of muscling. And then down at the bottom, you want to make sure to leave enough room for the kid's hand in their glove. Now, Division 3s tend to have really big gloves, so I tend to leave a rather large area for their hands. So this is probably about right. And you want to leave some extra room down at the end because you need to put foam down here for the butt of the weapon. So I have a layer of foam on, and now I have to deal with the thrusting tip. All the weapons I make have thrusting tips. It's just easier that way, especially because all of my weapons are loaner weapons. So you squeeze on the foam until you find the end of the pipe. Now, I said this in my other video, but you can use a measuring tape for all of this stuff. But I'm relatively lazy, and I also don't always have a measuring tape on me. But one of the great things about Duck brand duct tape is it is just shy of 2 inches. So, I use duct tape as my measuring tool when I am building weapons. Only Duck brand tape. If I'm using another brand of tape like 3M, I have to give a little bit more clearance because it's not just a scope shy of 2 inches. So you find the end of your weapon, and mine's right here. I can feel it in there. I put the duct tape up against it. That's 2 inches. And then I go just a little bit beyond that and cut. And now I have the end of my weapon with a thrusting tip. And if it's crooked and you're OCD like me, you are welcome to clean it up with scissors or a razor knife or whatever it may be. Now, the second layer. I use the gray self-sealing foam for all of my second layers. Just because it's easier to piece together after everything. Because once I find the pieces that fit properly, I just peel the sticky off and stick it together. You want 2 pieces of foam for this as a general rule. If your weapon is smaller, then 1 piece of foam might do it, but because you have to use 2 pieces on here to make it work. So, I'm going to flip it this way. So, what I generally do is I figure out where the seam was on my old foam. So the seam's right there. And I make sure that the new foam covers that. I'm going to tilt this down to my lap so you can see what I'm up to. And all I'm doing is I am wrapping this foam over the original layer of foam. I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering the original seam. And then I cut the weapon to the exact length of the previous layer. Then you make sure it's the same on the bottom, which I went a little bit beyond on the bottom just because it was raggedly cut and I wanted it to be nicely cut. You just trim it down here. And now you have a gap left. So, that's when your second piece of foam comes in. You can first check and see. And it looks like my first piece of foam will actually work. It's going to go from side to side. So, I'm going to trim off the bottom now just to make it easier. I'm purposely avoiding this end just because there is a dent in the foam and I don't feel like having that as part of my weapon. See? It had a dent. I didn't want to use it. You have to be careful about putting stuff on top of your foam because you don't want to dent it. Now, And take this other piece of gray foam, and we're going to open it up and make sure one side rests up against the piece that's already there. And then on the other side, we overlap the foam. So, once I've overlapped the foam, all I do is take my handy dandy scissors and I cut all the way up the length along the seam, along where the gap is, so that the two pieces are approximately the same size. Now when I push the two pieces together, there is little to no gap. And that's exactly what I want. So once you are done with that, you peel off the self-sticky plastic that they have on here and stick the two pieces together. The upside of using the self-sealing foam is that I don't need to hold the pieces together until I get them all taped down. I just use their self-sticking to hold them together. All I'm doing is sticking the pieces together nicely. All the way up the weapon. It's okay if one piece is longer than the other at the moment. We can trim that down later. As long as it's not shorter. Shorter isn't really so great. Then on the other side of the weapon, I'm pressing the two sticky pieces together. Sometimes you want to lift a little bit while you stick so that there's not a weird indent all the way up the weapon from where they tried to curl in on each other. But it's not a huge deal. I just am big on making my weapons as pretty as I can. And we have 2 layers of weapon that are nice and flush. So now I'm going to just take a second and I'm going to trim down the top of the gray foam, the dark gray foam, the self-sealing foam, to meet up with the original piece. And same on the bottom. You don't have to do that. I mean, the tape will really hold it down as a general rule. So now you have 2.5 inches across. Now down here on the butt of the weapon, we're going to do it just about the same way, except we only need it to go on enough to hold, and then it doesn't need to extend 2 inches past the end. It only needs to extend 1 inch. My 1 inch for me is about the width of my thumb to my knuckle. You can measure it more precisely if you like. I've been doing this a while. So I go down to about there, and I cut it down. And then with my gray self-sealing foam, I do another layer on top that fits that size exactly. Sometimes I have a piece of foam that'll fit, but I don't. So then you cut the second piece to be the same size. And fill in the gap. Overlap. Like that. And trim off the excess. You take off the sticky part and stick them together. Sometimes the sticky stuff tries to peel off of the foam. No, not a problem. I literally just stick it right back on there and then shove the two pieces together. So now we have the butt end of the weapon. I'm going to trim it a little bit, make it nice and pretty. Now for the important part. There are 2 holes in the middle right now. We need to fill those. On the bottom side of the weapon, it's not really a major deal if you pack it tight or you pack it loose or whatever needs to happen there. You just want some foam in there so it's squishy, so it holds the hex in. I just use spare foam. And because we're using a 1-inch weapon to do this, I need a little more foam than I do for my 3/4 inch because there's a bigger hole to fill. So I just take that and I push it in and it's nice and filled. Now on the top, you have to be a lot more careful because this is the thrusting end of the weapon. You need to be sure that it is packed well. So you take your gray foam, whichever gray foam you want. I find that the self-sealing foam works a little bit better for this purpose. And you measure your 2 inches. You want to measure it before you put it in. You want to make sure that you measure 2 inches and then just a little bit more for this piece. So then you take the foam. Start shifting it back up this way again. You guys can see my wonderful face, or at least my wonderful mouth. And then you're going to roll this piece up like a Swiss roll. Now you're not going to need all of this as a general rule, because as you can see right now it's too big. But you get an idea for how much you do need, and you trim off the rest. That fit perfectly, and all you do is you are working it into the hole. Now you want to make sure that it goes all the way in. Once it's all the way in, all you do is press down on the weapon and you have your nice tight thrusting tip. If the foam is sticking out once you push it in all the way, that means that your weapon base slid on you while you were building your weapon, and you need to pull it back so that you can finish fitting that foam in there. That's why we measure before we put it in, so that we know we have the 2 inches past the end of the weapon for the thrusting edge. Now, what you are also allowed to do, and I don't often do it, but I am doing it for this video, is to give some structural integrity to the thrusting area of the weapon. You can use strapping tape, a wrap or two of strapping tape, firmly but loosely wrapped around at about where the weapon and the thrusting tip are, or at the top of the thrusting tip. I like to put it right about here on the weapon when I bother. But you don't want to wrap it on really tight. You just want to lay it on there, 1 or 2 wraps, and it helps keep your thrusting tip from folding over. And then you just cut it off. So it gives a little more power to that, so it doesn't bend over on you. It shouldn't, as a general rule, but as it gets older, it starts to wear out. So now on to taping. So you need 2 contrasting colors for your weapon. Blue and white are contrasting. One color is going to be the base of the weapon, one color is going to be the striking edges and the handle. So I am going to use my nice dark blue as the base of the weapon. So you start down here. And what you want to actually do is start it down on the packs. Well, we're back to moving this down. You want to start it down on the packs so it has something to hold on to, because if you just tape the foam without taping it onto the weapon at all, when you go to throw a shot, it's going to fly off into nowhere. You never want to spiral wrap your tape. You always want to go the long way, or else you can compress the foam, and then it's not squishy anymore, and you can't use it. So you go all the way up, lay it down, lay it across the top of the weapon, and then on the thrusting tip, you pull out first, you lay it over. You don't want to compress the thrusting tip at all, because then it's not the size it needs to be, and it's no longer a thrusting tip, which is kind of a waste of foam. And you bring it all the way back down. And you lay it down. Now you're going to repeat that process until there is no gray foam left on the showing on the weapon. You overlap the duct tape slightly. You don't need to overlap it too much. You just want to make sure that you're covering up all the pieces of foam. And the same thing across the top. Lay it across. And keep going on the other side. Smooth it out. And one more piece should do it. One more time across the top. And you have the weapon completely covered in tape. The top is nice and pretty. It's not compressing the foam at all. And then, for the bottom half, you do the same thing. I'm sitting here hoping I have enough tape for the bottom half. If not, we'll work it out. So the same thing, you start it on the handle of the weapon. You go up, lay it across, and over. Back down onto the pecs. I can hear my duct tape's running out of steam on me. It starts to make that noise. Last piece, that should make it. Ah, no, not enough. Alright, well, it's not a huge deal if you run out of not enough. My cheater answer is to use another roll that is similar in color. So we're going to take a quick pause moment. And we are back. I ran out of my blue duct tape, but oddly enough, I happen to have another roll sitting around just to finish off this last little bit. If you don't have another roll of the same color, just use a color that's close. You know, like if I didn't have this blue tape, I'd probably use black. It's not really that big of a deal, but I happened to have more of the gray tape. Unfortunately, somebody used it in an impolite way, so I'm going to have to use more than one piece to finish off right here. So it's up, over, down, and onto the base. And then one more gap because my tape is smaller than it should be. I don't feel like wasting tape. And it covers up that last little bit. Yeah, my video makes it so that you don't wind up with this half-ripped roll of duct tape. I wasn't paying attention the last time I let somebody do a weapon, and they left it like that. So now I have a lot of half-roll of duct tape. So now we have a covered both ends, and now we take our contrasting roll of duct tape, which I'm going with white. Now, you don't want 2-inch wide striking edges on your weapon. You can go out and buy the 1-inch duct tape. My one suggestion with that, they have lots of really interesting colors in the little 1-inch brand of duct tape. My biggest note is do not buy glitter duct tape. Ever. None of it. Not the 1-inch, not the 2-inch, because what we found out the hard way on my niece's weapon is that glitter duct tape does not stick to itself. So I got her this nice rainbow glitter duct tape to use as her striking edges, and she was fighting, and it was falling off while she was fighting. So don't do it. It doesn't. It's lying when it says it's very sticky. It's not. It doesn't even stick to itself. So instead, since I have a 2-inch roll of duct tape, I didn't feel like going out and buying a bunch of 1-inch, is you take it and you start ripping it in half. Now, on a double layer weapon, what I do when I'm about to lay my edges is I look for the seams from the top layer. So I have a seam right here, and I have a seam right here. I want to make sure not to put my edges on that seam. So I'm going to start on this side, and it's just like when you're laying down the base color. I start it on the pecs. I'm going to go right in between the seams that I had before. And a nice straight line up. Lay it down. Over the top. And down the other side. and then back on here. And then, because it's a thrusting weapon, we have to prove that it's a thrusting tip on the top. So what we do is start it down here, and we make an X across the top. And then on the other side, you bring the tape down to right about where the piece started on the other side. And we have our X. Now we have the other half of this roll of duct tape to work with. To hold all the tape down up here, I use the other half, and I just gently circle right around where the thrusting tip would be ending. And that helps hold the thrusting tip tape down so it's not falling off while I swing. Now the rest of it, we have this empty handle here with little pieces of tape stuck to it. This is the only time when you're making a weapon that you get to be really rough with the duct tape. So you start it on one end, and you're going to make sure to cover the tape that's already there, and you're going to wrap it as hard as you can, crank it down, and spiral down the weapon. So what this does is it creates a nice grip for the weapon, and it also holds down all the tape that you already put on there so that it doesn't start falling off in the heat when your kid's in the middle of fighting or whatever. I spiral it all the way down, and once I get up here I want to crank it down really hard so it's holding all my tape on. And then I just keep spiraling until I've finished up with my half roll of tape that I have sitting here, which it almost is. And that's it. Now I have a nice full roll of duct tape for next time. And I have a very nice handle and blade. That is how you make a double-layered youth combat weapon out of 1-inch packs. Have a good one.